So it seems that many of you disagree with me. I made a video the other day talking about how I honestly didn't feel that YouTube content creators still had the same amount of influence on retro game prices as they did 4 to 5 years ago. In that video, I did mention that they do impact the retro gaming market. But what I stressed in that video was that I did not feel like content creators still had the same impact. And some of you disagreed with me. Some of you agreed with me. And it's okay to disagree with me. I think disagreements can be the birthplace of healthy conversation, healthy dialogue, and a great opportunity to understand another perspective different from yours. All that being said, I thought what would be healthy for the gaming community would be to highlight 6 Super Nintendo games that might be cheaper than you thought. And I wanted to highlight these games because there is a lot of content that highlights and glorifies the more rare and expensive stuff. And I also chose the Super Nintendo because a lot of times when our minds think retro, for a lot of people, their minds immediately go to a gray cartridge, whether it be Super Nintendo or the NES or the original Game Boy. When you think retro, you think cartridge. And I feel like the Super Nintendo is honestly, next to the Sega Genesis, of course, it represents the pinnacle of 4th generation gaming. And so I figured this would be a great place to highlight 6 games that are cheaper than $20. They're either $20 or cheaper, which again, cheap is a relative term because while $20 might be cheap to one person, $20 might be really expensive to another person. But for the sake of this video, we're going to call cheap anything that is $20 and under. So I'm going to highlight these 6 games, showcase them, and then you guys can let me know down in the comments if these are games that you already knew were cheap, or if you are surprised at how cheap some of these games are. Now, I'm sure the avid collectors out there are probably going to already know that these games are cheap. So this video is really more so for the new collectors or people who may want to collect, who don't live on price charting or aren't on eBay every day and aren't aware that there are fun games to play that won't cost you an arm and a leg. And that's what this video is going to stress, the fun factor of all these games. So of course, we're going to start with the certified hood classic, Super Mario World. Super Mario World is undeniably one of the greatest platforming games of all time. It takes the Super Mario Bros. Concept and creates and adds layers and layers of depth with the varying level designs that you have to play through, the different elements and obstacles that you have to face, the different attributes that Mario can possess, the fact that you have Yoshi available to you as well for certain levels, the music, the gameplay. I feel like Super Mario World is one of the best games that you could ever get if you own a Super Nintendo. And Super Mario World is not crazy expensive. For it being such an iconic game, Super Mario World actually happens to be one of the cheaper games on the console, and you should be able to pick up a copy of Super Mario World for between $17 and $20. It's very possible to find this game in good condition, loose cartridge, and mind you, all these prices are loose cartridge prices. These are not complete in box prices because of course that takes the price of all these games up to a whole nother level. So we're only looking at loose cart pricing. But for 17 to 18 bucks, you will get weeks, if not years worth of enjoyment from Super Mario World. And again, with a game as iconic as Super Mario World, I do not think that I need to elaborate too much on why this game is an amazing game to get for the money that you would pay for it. So if you were ever thinking that Super Mario World is too expensive for you to purchase or too much for you to add to your collection, think again, because you can get this game for under $20. The next game is another certified hood classic, and this is genuinely a certified hood classic. In fact, I probably saw growing up the Final Fight arcade in almost every hood pizza shop, every hood, arcade store. This is genuinely a certified hood classic. Final Fight is one of the most iconic beat 'em ups of the 90s, starring the ever famous Hagar. Um, and I really enjoy playing Final Fight. I've beat this game many times, and this one is super nostalgic to me because my brother had this game when I was growing up as a kid. The music in this game is classic. It's super iconic. The story is, it's it's so it's so on the nose, right? The a gang kidnaps the police chief's daughter, and he has to go through the city trying to rescue his daughter. This game maintains all of the tropes of 90s inner city problems: burning buildings, trash cans on fire, stray dogs running around the street, debris and trash everywhere. The scenes that are set in each of the levels just kind of represents a lot of the things that you would have really seen in any inner city in America, whether you grew up in LA, New York, DC, Miami, Chicago, Philly, Boston, wherever you were. There was a part of your city that looked like one of the levels in Final Fight. And so um beyond all that, I would honestly have to say that the original Final Fight is probably in the top 10 of beat 'em ups of all time. I'm still not going to put it ahead of Streets of Rage 2. You all know how I feel about Streets of Rage 2. Nothing gets more iconic than Streets of Rage 2, but for the Super Nintendo, Final Fight does a good job of getting close to it. And in my opinion, Final Fight is one that's definitely worth having in your collection. There's a myriad of ways you could play Final Fight. I mean, Final Fight is on so many different consoles, from the Sega CD to the Game Boy Advance. There's a lot of versions of this game. But in my opinion, the Super Nintendo is probably going to be one of the cheapest ways to play this game, because you can pick up a copy of Final Fight for roughly around $15. So this is not an expensive game at all. You'll get plenty of enjoyment from it. It is an arcade style beat 'em up, and this is definitely one that I would recommend. Capcom was crushing it back in the day, and they definitely killed it with this one. I say this is worth picking up for the price and giving it a playthrough. Now, there are sequels to this game in Final Fight 2 and of course Final Fight 3. The sequels definitely, the price goes up exponentially for those games. Final Fight 2 is roughly between 50 or 60 bucks, if I'm not mistaken, and Final Fight 3, last time I checked, was over $100 for Final Fight 3. Now, granted, those games add more complexity. They have more optionality when it comes to different attacks that you can use. There's different characters that you could select for those games. So that's what makes those cool. But a great place to start, especially because of this is where the story originates. Final Fight is definitely a classic. Highly recommend you look into this one. For 15 bucks, you can't lose. Next up, Super Street Fighter 2. So Street Fighter is another certified hood classic. If you've ever been to a barbershop in the 90s, a liquor store in the 90s, an arcade store in the 90s, they had some version of Street Fighter there, whether it was the original Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, or Super Street Fighter 2. And this is another one that, again, this is not rare by any means. You could get this for the Sega Genesis, and believe it or not, a lot of people feel that the Sega Genesis version of Super Street Fighter 2 is better than the Super Nintendo, primarily because if you're playing Super Street Fighter 2 on the Genesis with a 6-button controller, it's a lot easier to pull out your light, medium, and heavy attacks, like your light, medium, heavy punch, light, medium, heavy kick. So it makes for a better arcade fighting experience when you're playing with a 6-button controller, as opposed to the Super Nintendo controller, where your heavy kicks and punches are the left and right button, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, it's a little bit of muscle memory. It's really all preference. A lot of people just prefer having all levels of attack right there at your thumb tip or fingertips, for that matter. All that being said, Street Fighter 2 is undeniably one of the most, if not the most, iconic fighting game franchise of all time. I think when a lot of people think 2D fighters, they either go to Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. Of course, there's others that come to mind: King of Fighters, Samurai Showdown. But because of the consoles that those games were on, like with SNK, they were not as prevalent, at least not in North America, as the Street Fighter series. And so, again, this is another one that you would be shocked at how cheap this game is. You could definitely pick this one up for somewhere between $15 and $19. The prices vary, of course. The label, the condition of the label matters as well. But this is one that you should be able to easily pick up and add to your Super Nintendo collection if you don't already have it, and it will not break the bank. Of course, there's a number of ways you can play this game as well. I've already mentioned the Sega Genesis. There are countless Street Fighter collections games that have come out across a number of platforms, from the PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, they just released a Capcom Classics Fighting Collection a couple years ago, and I'm pretty sure this game is on it. So you don't necessarily have to get this on the Super Nintendo, but if you want the most nostalgic experience, it's here for you, and it's here for you at a really good price. Next up, we have Donkey Kong Country. So again, another one that might shock you in terms of how cheap this one is. The Donkey Kong Country series in general is not ridiculously expensive, regardless of if it's 1, 2, or 3. I think I don't think any one of those games really goes for more than $30, but the cheapest of the bunch is definitely Donkey Kong Country, the original. Very fun game, very fun side-scrolling platformer. The art style on this always got me when it comes to the Donkey Kong Country series, because it didn't follow the traditional like sprite-based graphical art style like you would have saw on a Mario. It always had more of this kind of like 3D effect to it, even with it being on the Super Nintendo. I would say the hallmark of the Donkey Kong Country games has always been the music. Hands down, some of the best music of this generation ever. Like each level, the music that they associated with each level was perfection, chef's kiss. And I think that's the standout quality for me when it comes to the Donkey Kong Country series in general. I mean, your favorite YouTuber probably uses some soundtrack from the Donkey Kong Country series. So again, this is one that you may not have realized is as cheap as it is. But again, this is another one that you should be able to pick up for between $16 and $19. This is one that's definitely easily attainable for under $20. A great game, will provide you with a ton of fun. It's expansive. There's a lot of levels. There's a lot of depth to this game. Definitely one worth looking into adding to your collection. So again, Donkey Kong Country, definitely one that you should be on the lookout for. Next up, so we have another awesome beat 'em up here. Now, X-Men, the Apocalypse. This is the arcade apocalypse version of X-Men. The thing that I really love about this one is honestly the character design in this game. If you look at the way they design the characters in this version, if the designs and the models kind of follow through all the way up to where you get to like the Street Fighter versus X-Men series, and eventually till we get to the Marvel versus Capcom series and things like that. I've always been a fan of how large and bright and colorful the characters represent in this game. And while this game isn't quite as fun as War of the Gems, which is another beat 'em up that Capcom produced, following kind of like the Marvel series. I personally like War of the Gems just because the characters that you get to choose from. Don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on Beast or Wolverine or Psylocke or any, Gambit, any of the characters that you can use in this game. Cyclops, I think you can play as him. But I did like being able to play as the Hulk or Iron Man or Spider-Man or Wolverine. I can't remember who the fifth person was. Oh, Captain America in War of the Gems. So War of the Gems is typically going to be more expensive. Also, I think just, the gems aspect, the fact that you can utilize different power gems to activate different attributes in War of the Gems, I think it added another layer of depth to that one that makes it a more complex beat 'em up. I think that's why War of the Gems is more expensive. While X-Men Arcade Apocalypse is a beautiful side-scrolling beat 'em up, this one does feel a little bit more bland. I'm going to be honest. But I think for the value, right? You can pick this one up for, again, between I would say 18 and 20 bucks. You mean you could probably find this for 15 bucks. It probably won't be common to find it that cheap, especially if it's in good condition. But this is still a quality game for, under $20, I would say. Just from a sprite-based perspective, the beauty of the game, the beat 'em up action, I think is pretty cool. It does feel a little bland at times. It does. Be honest, it does feel a little bland at times, but it's still a fun game. Not the best music, but Capcom has always done well with beat 'em up. So I think just the fact that it was a Capcom beat 'em up, I think that's what really helps it. It's worth a playthrough, and I do think it's worth a spot in your collection, especially if you're just starting your collection off for the first time. I would say pick up Arcade Apocalypse, and if you really like this one, definitely look into War of the Gems, because you'll probably like War of the Gems a lot more. Last but not least, you have, and this is probably the cheapest game on this list, to be quite honest with you, you have Batman Forever. Now, Batman Forever, I'm just gonna be honest again, is probably the least fun Batman game out of all Batman games on the Super Nintendo. Because of course, you have Batman Returns, which is a Konami beat 'em up, which plays pretty good in my opinion. Honestly, I actually prefer the Batman Returns on the NES. I think that one plays a little bit better than the Super Nintendo, in my opinion. But you do have Batman Returns on the Super Nintendo, and you also have The Adventures of Batman and Robin, which is probably the best Batman game for the Super Nintendo. If I'm missing a Batman, you can let me know down in the comments. But those are the three that I have in my collection. And Batman Forever just is the least fun to me. I think they really tried to model this one after the Batman Forever movie that came out, I think in the late 90s, which was a decent movie. I think that was the one that starred George Clooney. Had George Clooney, Uma Thurman, I forgot who plays Batgirl in that one. But, what's the dude? The dude that plays Two-Face. God, name is escaping me right now. But really great actors. I just don't think that this one translated very well into the game. The biggest reason why I don't think this game was good was that they used the same, I don't want to use the word skin, but basically it was like the Batman version of Mortal Kombat. You know how Mortal Kombat characters have this very herky-jerky, simulated type of movement to them. All their movements feel very kind of sped up, almost they're moving at like 1.5 speed, and it just doesn't allow for very smooth gameplay. That's why I was never really a huge fan of Mortal Kombat, where they use the same type of graphical and I guess design aspect in Mortal Kombat, because the characters move very herky-jerky. The level design just feels very dark, but not in a good way. I'm not a fan of it. Neither the Super Nintendo version, nor the Sega Genesis version, nor the Game Boy version. No version of Batman Forever is really awesome to me. But some people like it. Some people really do like Batman Forever. And this is probably one of the cheapest Batman games you could get on any platform, because you could probably pick this game up for under $10. So that, the fun factor is reflected in the price on this one. And this is probably the cheapest game in this bunch that you could get. But again, if you're interested, if you have a lot of nostalgia for that Batman movie, this might be one that you want to take a look at and see, how fun it is for you. And that does it for this list of games that are under 20 bucks. These are some solid Super Nintendo pickups that I think are definitely worth a look-see. They're cheap, they're fun for the most part, and I think they're ones that you will probably enjoy. If you've never had these in your collection and you don't want to break the bank, you could probably pick all of these games up for under 100 bucks, which is pretty good for a classic 4th generation console like the Super Nintendo. Let me know what you guys think about this list down below, and if there are any other games that are under $20 that you think qualify and should belong in this list, let me know, and I will catch you in the next one. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.